And so why? And so it's because the language is there. And in a certain way, this is a very easy way to write if you're feeling lazy. The words just come in. They've been written already. But what Orwell finds more ominous is that this is a kind of thought control, similar to the kind of thought control that poor Winston felt in 1984. He didn't have the word freedom. It wasn't available to him, so he couldn't think that thought, right? He had to make up newspaper articles about events that never happened to construct a history to make the society function. So what he says, Orwell says, is that he finds it very ominous that ready-made phrases will construct your sentences for you, even think your thoughts for you to a certain extent. And at need, they will perform an important service of partially concealing your meaning even from yourself. So he's saying that we're turning ourselves into machines by using this kind of language. Which, I mean, might sound kind of like an exaggeration. I don't know. But I do know that when I write those kinds of words, or try to take them out and then they get edited back in by higher powers at the office, I feel terrible. I feel like a tool. And for him, they're bad. So this line might be called "Why Bad Writing Happens to Bad People," right? He sees that these verbs can be used to hide meaning. They can be a kind of euphemism, this big line of words. So Stalin might say, eliminate all unreliable elements. The simple Saxon verb kill is what he means. I'm going to kill everybody here who disagrees with me, right? Now Nixon here, and this is actually, interestingly, like several decades after Orwell wrote this essay, has what he called this pacification program in North Vietnam to try and finally put an end to this pesky war. And so when he talked about intensifying our pacification programs in North Vietnam, it really meant firebomb more villages, right? And this is what doublespeak from 1984. All right, this is one of my favorite evasions in the history of our modern politics. This is Bush speaking during the 2007 State of the Union address. It's a moment, I know you guys are excited to see it. I thought I'd read his biography tonight. So basically, Bush was finally going to admit that he was responsible for some things that went wrong in Iraq, like maybe there were no weapons of mass destruction or something like that. But instead, he said, literally, where mistakes have been made, the responsibility lies with me. The simple phrasing that Orwell would want would be, I made mistakes. But Bush is not saying that. He's using the passive voice here. You guys are all familiar with the passive voice? I'm like a grammar teacher, right? So he's using it because the subject of the sentence remains unnamed. Somebody built the wall, but we're not going to say who. And of course, we all use this as students. Like, I remember writing things like, the wall was built in 1704. Like, I don't remember who built the wall. Because you can hide information. You can hide information that you don't know, but you can also hide information you want to hide. Like, I made mistakes. Instead, he's just manfully stepping up for somebody who's off screen. And then we have Sarah Palin, who, of course, is not using any of those multisyllabic words unless she's making fun of Obama. Yeah, but she has her own euphemisms, like, real Americans are small-town folks like you and me. And we contested this during a rehearsal, but I think she means real Americans are white Christians. Yeah. So basically, and this is Orwell's conclusion about this, when there is a gap between one's real and one's declared aims, one turns, as it were, instinctively to long words and exhausted idioms, like a cuttlefish spurting out ink. And I like how he put his original metaphor at the end. You should use the visual language. But what I wonder, I mean, it would be fun to talk about these guys all night because they're bad. But the truth is that, good people use these things too. Like Obama, I would say, exhausted the hell out of a certain metaphor during this most recent campaign, talking about that car in the ditch. You guys remember that? Like the car was in the ditch and the Republicans want the keys back. We were giving the keys back because they were just sitting on the sidelines drinking Slurpee while we're trying to get the car back on the road. And it's like, we don't even need Obama. And that was clever the first couple of times, but when you go around saying it mechanically day after day after day, you're missing out on a chance to actually say what you mean, which is Republicans destroy the economy, do not vote them back into office. And of course he does that too. But you should say in specific ways, who did it, how. People deserve to know we're not idiots. And then we have me. Look at me, and look what I wrote. Prioritize based on the urgency. I don't know. I mean, I feel like we all have to do certain things at work, but it felt a little different than it. Yeah. And I think what I really meant was I don't give a shit. I want to go home. Just approve the sentence and let me go home. It's Friday. So this is why I think that good people make mistakes, and I think that we also turn instinctively to the long words and exhausted idioms, when we want to hide something or when we don't want to communicate. The first is when we need to make our bad ideas, right? Just we think our bad sound impressive, and just to remember back to the resume, we have a student who thinks no one wants to hire me, I don't know anything, but I'll throw in all this business speak and then I'll sound cool, right? We don't care if other people understand us at all. Like the technological example. That person just wanted to finish their essay, or their article they were writing for a techie magazine, even though they weren't a tech person. And then, oh, I'm missing one. Okay, well. Okay. A lot of times we don't understand what we're writing about either, which I guess actually does go for that techie guy. But I really think also goes for the architectural example. Like, we want to say that we're saying something really new and deep about this space, but we're just standing there and we're a marketing person, and we just see paintings on the wall. We're like, huh, what will David like us to say? So we put it. And then we need to hide something. And this is something that a friend of mine pointed out, Jordan, who's a lawyer, that sometimes language needs to be sort of imprecise or passive because you can't say what you did and be held legally accountable for it. You need to moderate. And that's why we use facilitate too. We can't say that we did peace, but maybe we helped make peace, right? We facilitated the peacemaking process of others. We mobilized resources to address a plethora of problems facing us today, but we didn't really make peace. And then the last one, which I feel often, is that I don't really care what I'm saying. Because we don't care what we're saying. We're writing for other people. We're like the tool. But I still think that we can do something about this. So what can we do about it? This is from another essay of Orwell's, and it's a line I love. It's prose is like the window pane. Does anyone have a thought about what that might mean?
I think it's just going back to what somebody said about that one sentence. It lacked imagery of it. I think good prose is that window into getting the brain working to really make an emotional connection to words.
Yes, it shows you what you're talking about. Yeah.
Also, like from the standpoint of not having something to hide, like you want people to understand, you want people to be able to see you and feel what you're talking about.
That's true.
Well, it's like the transparency. It's like you see the view through the window. You don't see the window pane. You see what the window pane is showing.
Right. So a lot of those examples that we saw are actually putting up blocks to our comprehension. They scare you away with these big words so you don't understand what they're saying, or so you don't, or you just don't want to understand anymore. Yeah.
But you also, like, in the window pane, you can see a little reflection of yourself. Whereas when you're looking through really complicated prose, you don't feel connected to any of it. It feels like it's deliberately being removed.
Oh, I like that a lot, actually. Yeah. I think that's true. Thank you. No, I've never heard that explanation. I think it's true. Yeah, and actually, I mean, you're right, because a lot of that bad writing that you're seeing, it doesn't have a voice. Someone pointed out that it sounded kind of mechanized. I think those are all great examples, or great explanations of what that could mean. And I think it's a useful idea. And again, I don't think it's an aesthetic idea to hold in mind. I think it's a value, like a moral. When you're writing there, the purpose of writing is to convey an idea. That's true. The purpose of writing is to communicate an idea, to say something, right? And the purpose of language is to communicate. And when it doesn't communicate, it sounds bad because it's failing at its basic function. All right. So I rewrote a few of these sentences using that value, like not even using any kind of arbitrary rule. So what is this person? Right? I mean, how many people have ever hired an intern? Who would you rather hire? Right or left?
Yeah. Right.
I mean, this person could insert her voice and say what she really wants to do, and that shows that she's eager, like the window pane shows. I will do anything. Hire me. I would hire. And I think that you have to do your best to explain. And again, like the writing on the right, we're not looking for, Tolstoy here. My friend Adam rewrote this because I would not be able to. It said solid-state drives provide persistent data storage, much like hard drives. Hard drives are more economical in terms of capacity. Solid-state drives in terms of performance. And I don't know what the last part means, but I understand the rest of it. He's making a comparison between these two different ways of storing data. And he's making kind of, to help you make a value judgment about maybe which one you want. And it came down to explaining terms and to just having the foresight of seeing where people would need you to fill in information to give exposition. And the third value, I think that's important, is really the Orwell value, to be vivid, clear, and concrete. So, instead of having this continuous environment, this encompassing experience, what is an encompassing experience? These rooms are flowing into each other, rich in paintings and sculpture. This gallery is a home, this home is a gallery. Which I might say is actually perhaps a bit cheesy, but I will also say that I can visualize the space on the right. But I still don't think I've solved our problem with values, because sometimes values just don't apply. I will argue there's a sixth reason why we write badly, and you guys might be thinking it. If we're writing within a system, we need to use the word innovate. Our bosses like that. We're writing in a setting where we're expected to produce something that looks like that. Like we can't use visual language or metaphor or biblical prose when we're writing a government report. So what can we do to make that kind of writing better for a scientific report? Where also I should point out that a lot of the large words that you use in science, it turns out you actually need to use them because they're specific things. Yeah. They are. And I would say it's the largest of group thing. Now I love this image. Steph gave me this image of a former job she had, and it shows basically editing that's been going on where a person has produced something and other people are writing on top of that. And I think that I felt that way in the past. Okay. So I think that when you can no longer operate from your value space, from your moral center, you have to apply arbitrary rules. Like maybe you don't see if there's a reason not to kill somebody, but you shouldn't do it. So Orwell suggests some basic pointers, which I have included in a handout. One that I like really very much is not to use a long word where a short one will do. Try to be as brief as possible. Use an active formation instead of a passive one. Don't use worn-out metaphors, and don't use pretentious phrasing. And this was something that was new to me before I went to Columbia, which is that you need to try to make a sentence into a story. That we're actually programmed to understand things in a narrative way. In other words, a sentence begins with a subject, a verb happens, a subject does something to something else, which is the object. Now, if you begin your sentence with something like an explanation of the word's causes, which is what Orwell calls, I think, a noun construction, that's not something that we can picture. We cannot picture an explanation of the war's causes. It's just something that's very abstract to us. But we can picture Abraham Lincoln, right? We can't picture the subatomic rotation, but we can picture an electron. Even though it's wrong, we're not picturing it right, we're picturing a little dot that's like circling a slightly bigger dot. We're still seeing it. So this is from a writer and educator who passed away last year called Joe Williams, who taught at the Little Red Schoolhouse for years and years. And what he really thought was that, looking at student writing, if you could just do one thing, you could put the subject at the beginning of the sentence where it belongs, in the beginning of the story, you can make your writing a whole lot clearer. All right, the second one, there's some other narrative techniques you can use for your writing. One is that the subject should occur early, as well as make something you can picture. The first words of your sentence should be the easiest. If you're going to be telling someone something difficult, make sure that you don't immediately frighten them with something really frightening, like much the language you've seen. The emphatic words of sentence should be at the end. Arrive somewhere at the end of your sentence. And there's actually, we're getting close to the end. You know, there's one sentence I want to read. I'm going to be it down there. Okay, this is from Sprunk and White, who wrote The Elements of Style, which is a really old style book, but it's great still. So the first one, where the emphatic word is not at the end, is humanity has hardly advanced in fortitude since that time, though it has advanced in many other ways. One where it's at the end is, since that time, humanity has advanced in many ways, but it has hardly advanced in fortitude. It's sort of more church well sort of. Nice. All right, and then use the concrete language. Okay, so this is the last sentence that we're going to look at. I tried to rewrite one sentence from that really horrible report in the Department of Homeland Security. So the first one is, I think, really unreadable, largely because it has the subject buried, we, and it also has that noun construction. Contributed to department-wide management integration is not something we can begin to understand or picture. I actually don't know what management integration is. That's a slight confession. But afterwards, we noted that while the plan was a step in the right direction, it did not fully explain how the department can better integrate management or fully improve operations. I would argue it's still a very boring and horrible sentence that I would pay not to read, but I think it's better. And when all else fails, Orwell always said to laugh. Add bad language and get rid of it.